Most people become anxious or depressed a lot of times because they're either trying to live up to unrealistic expectations they set for themselves or trying to live up to unrealistic expectations of others. And I find this particularly in adolescence, Matt.
Yeah, and they don't know, and they frequently don't even realize whose script they're running. It takes a couple of different years and iterations to you think you're having original thoughts, and then you realize that those are there's occasional original thoughts, but most of them are filtered down ideas that you've seen or heard or read somewhere, heard from your parents or read in a book, and you're bringing them to the surface, and then you do some personal work and are able to see a little bit of the script you're playing and the origins of that, and realize, oh yeah, I'm just like dad when dad gets angry, or I'm just like mom when this happens, and then you run a little bit deeper and realize, oh, that's teachers or culture.
And how would you use technology to be a bridge? How would you use technology to help people understand or deal with their thoughts and feelings?
Yeah. So one of the things is with technology is there's so much of it out there that you don't need to go very far. So a simple example, I started my parents are divorced. I'll text with my mom sometimes, I text with my dad, I text with there's a family text chat, and the other day I sent a text message to just my mother and father. It was just the three of us on a group text. And that little tiny group text, right, became this rich little bubble of love for a period of a couple weeks. That we just ended up sending some communication there, and we all realized that it wasn't going to any of my brothers or sisters or my stepsisters or my wife or my kids, or it was just me and mom and dad. And the a technology enabled little bubble of support, and I didn't need a special app for that. I didn't need but it would not have been possible on a phone, the cell phone that I had 8 years ago.
So quite often what we try to help people understand is that active listening is 90% of communication. And we help people understand that most conflicts, misunderstandings, bitterness, or hurt feelings occur because we either assume that the other person knows what we think, knows what we're feeling, and knows what our needs are. How can maybe perhaps social media or these communication ways that are coming up new every day, how can that help in that? How can you, as a purveyor of technology, assist with that?
And it's a good question, because it certainly, the misunderstandings happen more commonly in some channels. So text messaging is particularly bad for that. It's quick, it's light. You can use emojis, so you can avoid using language that can be restrictive. Like, you can present a visual symbol that could be interpreted in a couple different ways, and in some ways that's for the better. But I think one is just being mindful that each channel is different. I think that's something that people may not take into account. One example is there's now messaging apps or platforms, like Slack would be one good example, where people are wondering, how might we have Slack for healthcare, for instance, is one of the things some companies are working towards, those types of technology solutions to enable more rapid, real-time communication around patient cases. But they're realizing that the way in which we communicate over text messaging is often it's more glib. It can be more snarky or more sarcastic or more informal, and that doesn't work with a lot of places, including medicine. And so, just because you can have a particular um, technology or tool doesn't mean you should be using it. The other thing I'm reminded of is you mentioned um, when it's the theme of the podcast, that explosive mindfulness and leaning into things and the intentionality. Um, and I think I invite people to be intentional with their technology and also creative, like just that, like that text channel that I was talking about with my parents. It's such a dumb little thing that, like, well, of course you can just send a text to just those people and not other people. But I remember as I was doing it, I was like, I just want to send this to. I was frustrated. I was like, oh, I wanted to send something to mom. I was like, I'm just going to send it to dad at the same time, and just the three of us. And it was this tiny little act of creation to put that channel into existence. But then it stayed there.
And you're talking about intentionality.
Yeah.
And that was your intention.
And that was my intention. I just want to create this channel here. And but I also had to be mindful that, like, it wasn't some, if something came across the other way that I wanted to share with other people, then I've got to, copy and paste it or show them the thread, or it has its own downside. But
So what do you say to people who get caught up in the new bells and whistles, who
well, I'm one of them.
What I'm speaking of is telephones, particularly. That I don't know if they come out as often as they used to, but it seemed like they were coming out every 4 or 5 weeks, and you had to have this. And I know it's a marketing tool, but they made people feel that they were being left behind if they didn't have.
And they slowed it. Yeah, and they slowed. The newer phones are allowed to operate faster. Like the old phones are slowed down. Basically, if you don't buy a new phone, if your iPhone, I was talking to somebody today who has like an iPhone 5 something, and it does not operate as fast as.
So, Matt, how can we help people understand when technology ceases to become a tool and the individual becomes a tool of technology?
Going back to your point about intentionality, I would continue to question your intent as to why you're doing something. There's an author named Cal Newport, and he wrote a great book called Deep Work, and I recommend it to all my patients. Deep Work. And he's a computer science professor, really busy guy who also found time to write several novels. He's home by like 5:30, doesn't work on weekends, and really just gets things done during his time. But also he's in the busy field of academic computer science. So not only is he a computer scientist, but he writes about computer science, writing intense research articles, and then also books. So has to do a lot of heavy lifting with thinking. It's not just cutting and pasting things or running around with one meeting followed by the next. It's having deep, productive thought channeled into words and sentences and paragraphs and books. And one of the things he suggests is scheduling time where you can be distracted.
That's interesting.
And not scheduling time to focus. So the average person might say, okay, well, I'm going to during this 30-minute period or even this 90-minute period, I'm really just going to work here, and I'm not going to check Facebook and whatnot. And which means that their default mode, the way they normally go about things outside of that time frame, is I'm going to let myself get distracted. If my phone goes off, I'm going to check it. If an email bling goes off, I'm going to check it. If a tweet goes off, or I want to take a picture and put it on my Instagram story, I'll do that. What he suggests is, however, finding time where you schedule the time during which you will let yourself be distracted by things. But the other time, you should be focused on a thing, doing a thing. But just by flipping that, it changes the whole scenario. And I found it very
those are
helpful.
making choices.
And those are making choices. That's right. And giving yourself the default that you will not be distracted.
Giving yourself permission.
Yeah.
So quite often we help people understand that their brains are merely masses of organic goo, and what they are is they're repositories for data, okay? And our minds are the things that shape, shift, sort, and process and add importance to thoughts. And simply because a thought's repetitive or loud, our mind can think that it's important, which kind of the basis of obsessional thinking. So what we ask people to is to step back and learn how to speak to themselves, to step back and become the I, the authentic self, become the observer self, and deal with that mind. When a child's anxious or upset or frightened or afraid, or let's say a puppy, you have a puppy. Do you scream at that puppy? Does that work? Or what do you do when your child's anxious or afraid, Matt? You scream at them?
I try not to.
What do you do?
When my child's anxious or afraid?
Yeah.
Well, I think the most important thing is letting them know you see them and hear them.
They're being heard, that their voice is being heard.
Yeah. So, whether that's, and I was surprised that in my child therapy training that some of the tools for that were just really simple. So for instance, like, repetition. If a kid says, this is my puppy, he's hurt, oh, that's your puppy, he's hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Just mirroring that.
Doing feeling reflections. Right.
Yeah. Reflecting back on, and they know that what they're putting out into the world was seen, heard, and you're tracking them,
and you're being acknowledged, and you're being heard, and which means that your thoughts and feelings have merit. And in reality, you're comforting that child, and you're encouraging them to understand that they're allowed to have thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, and not even, and maybe not comforting them, but it is comforting for them. But one step before that is, validating them that they're operating with sort of real pieces of information, because they often go throughout their day unsure if what they're seeing and feeling and experiencing is real, if that matters, if it's because adults, we're often paying attention to other things than what kids are, and can quickly write up child's experiences to play or fantasy or nonsense.
Well, what we try to do is help people, and this is a common theme of this program, is to help people be able to label and describe thoughts and feelings. Just like you have a puppy. Why do people name puppies? Why do people name pets? Well, if they ran outside and you never named them, you wouldn't be able to bring them back. Okay? And that's the way that thoughts and feelings are. Sometimes if we can't able to label and describe them, we can't bring them back. And speaking of bringing back, we'd love to have you on our show again in the future. We're spinning around to just like we do. We encourage people to go down to rabbit holes. We ask them to walk through life with their eyes wide open.
Yeah.
So you have an open invitation to come into our world. You're always welcome here, Matt.
I'd love to be back. It's always fun talking with you.
You're always welcome. So if you have any comments about this program, Mike's our producer, my good friend and co-host often of this program, Mr. Mike, will show you how to contact us at the end. And also, we give a free prescription at the end of every podcast: fruits, nuts, and vegetables. Unplug your television and take up fishing. And for a truly mindful experience, we ask that you fish without bait. And as always, we ask you to forgive yourself, to forgive another, be kind to everyone that you meet, treat everyone you meet with courtesy and respect, and learn how to talk with yourself as a friend till all are free, none are free. Namaste.
please check out our website at fishingwithoutbait.com, where you can listen to the show, comment on our discussions, and find out where you can subscribe to our podcast. If you're interested in flying the colors of Fishing Without Bait, click the shop icon on our website. We have clothing, mugs, cell phone cases, and so much more. Show the world that you fish without bait. This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.